against any encouragement of the occupation or silence in the face of the violations in Palestine. We also caution against any transfer of an embassy to Al-Quds, because Al-Quds is occupied land and is the capital of the state of Palestine.
And we're going to be joined via phone from Geneva by Hillel Neuer. He's the executive director of the UN Watch, a group that monitors anti-Israel bias at the UN, at the United Nations. But first, let's go straight to Washington, D.C., joined by Amir Tibon Haaretz. Sorry, not yet. Let's go straight to Hillel. Hillel, how are you?
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Let me ask you this. Now, Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas standing on that stage just a short while ago. But good news over the weekend, one will say, do you believe, Hillel, that the United States will actually pull out of the UNHRC?
They might decide to do that. I think it would be a wrong decision, not because the Council is a good place. I think it's a very pernicious institution. But sadly, it's not going away. I was here when the George W. Bush administration pulled out from 2006 to 2009. It didn't make it better. We need someone strong and tough, like the old U.S. Ambassador Patrick Moynihan or like Nikki Haley in New York, who will stand up and fight. Otherwise, very bad things will happen. Reports like the Goldstone report will be commissioned, sent to The Hague. The Human Rights Council is not going to go away. All the other countries will stay here, and a lot of bad things will happen. The U.S. should send a tough ambassador and fight.
And Mr. Neuer, I'm going to ask you this just to play devil's advocate. I think the Palestinians would argue otherwise. When, Mahmoud Abbas stands on that stage and calls for a two-state solution, do you think that's even something that the new UNHRC can deliver to him?
No, the UNHRC has no power to deliver a state, but
there you go.
It can shame countries, and it can cause a lot of damage. Its decisions are translated in every language. They have emergency sessions. They create commissions of inquiry, which have captivated the attention of Israeli leaders and institutions. So it is an institution that can cause a lot of damage, and it just elected Saudi Arabia and Cuba and China for a 3-year term. This afternoon I will be there, and Jean Ziegler, a UN Human Rights Council expert who created the Muammar Gaddafi Human Rights Prize, will be speaking. So it's a very strange and upside-down institution. You couldn't make this up if you wanted to.
No, I know, and Hillel, I'm wondering with you, why does it matter then? Because the UNHRC doesn't really affect many things when it comes. I mean, it's strong condemnations, people would argue, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate. And the Muammar Gaddafi Human Rights Prize is really one for the books. That, entirely right in you saying it. But why is it so important in your mind that the United States sends such a message to it?
Well, if you just look at the state of Israel, we know that when the Goldstone report came out in 2009 and subsequent commissions of inquiry, the Prime Minister became involved in major negotiations with the Americans and others to try to stop it. You had the ministries, the Justice Ministry, the Foreign Ministry, the IDF, all trying to figure out ways to deal with it. It's connected to the ICC. When the Israeli cabinet meets, they say, how do we avoid getting hauled before the International Criminal Court? The Human Rights Council, one of the things it does, the Palestinians use it to try to build a case against Israel, which they send to The Hague. So, yes, some of its decisions, its resolutions have no immediate impact, but other mechanisms that it creates can cause reputational damage that erodes Israel's ability to defend itself in the international arena and even in the battlefield.
And even in the battlefield. And when it comes to the next step, I mean, first of all, we all read that Politico article yesterday. The United States might pull out. If it doesn't, what other methods or modes of operation, so to speak, would your group is called the UN Watch, what do you hope to do?
Well, we think that it would be one thing if the U.S. would pull out and the whole thing would collapse. But we were here 10 years ago when they tried that. It didn't work. The Europeans, like the Human Rights Council, the other Asian and African countries, they're mostly very happy with it. So it's not going to go away. So we need to be there in the arena and fight. There's a reason that Russia, China, France, and other world powers fight very hard to campaign to win a seat, because they want influence in a body that does have a certain influence around the world. And so America should be there. They should send someone who is clever and firm and principled to join with us and fight for human rights and fight against anti-Israel bias and anti-Semitism in this body.
Okay. Hillel, I don't know if you can stay with us, but let's go now to Washington, D.C.